Okay, we can move on to item number 2. Watling Street, Nuneaton. And just in as I said, Councillor Tromans is down to speak. It seems a bit odd because I've got Councillor Condicore down as the ward councillor and Councillor Tromans down as the ward councillor. I think that's purely because the majority of the application site is within Weddington, but some of the access points are in St Nicolas. Okay. So I'm trying to be fair, that's why I've allowed Councillor Tromans to be able to speak. Okay, Claire?
Thank you. This application is on Callendar Farm, Nuneaton, and is for the erection of up to 850 dwellings with vehicular access, a mixed-use local centre including retail development and community buildings with uses A1 to A5, D1 and D2 use classes. Also proposed is a primary school, a rest area to replace the lay-bys on the A5. There's also green infrastructure with an open space network with footpaths, cycleways, children's play space, sports pitches and sustainable drainage. Existing agricultural buildings and numbers 160 and 162, the long shoot, are to be demolished. It's an outline application but includes access as a reserved matter, which deals with access into the site, not the layout within. This application has been submitted with an environmental impact assessment, which aims to protect the environment by ensuring that a local planning authority, when deciding whether to grant planning permission for a project which is likely to have significant effects on the environment, does so in the full knowledge of what those likely significant effects are and takes them into account in the decision-making process. The site is the land associated with Callendar Farm and is actually phase 2 of the development. Phase 1 is shown here on this excerpt from the master plan. This is the Cresswell's Farm site. That site has been purchased by Gelson and the reserve matters application for that part of the land is under consideration. As members will see from the agenda, there have been several letters of objection covering a variety of topics. Officers consider that the key issues with this application are the principle of residential development on this site, travel, transportation and highway safety, open spaces and ecology, noise and air quality, and finally planning obligations. There are lots of other issues identified on the report, but I do not propose to cover these in my verbal report to you. As has been stated several times to members in previous committees, the Council does not have a 5-year land supply. However, should the forthcoming Borough Plan inquiry find that the plan is sound, this will change. At the present time, the Borough cannot demonstrate a 5-year land supply to meet the identified housing need, and this is a matter that weighs significantly in favour of this application. Land classification policies such as ENV2 and ENV3, which cover some of this site in the 2006 Borough Plan, are designed to prevent the spread of development, but they are now considered out of date because the Council cannot demonstrate that 5-year land supply. It's clear, therefore, that these policies cannot be taken into account when determining this application. As members will be aware, the Borough Plan is progressing. Stage 2 of the hearings are due to take place next month. It is made clear in the National Planning Policy Framework, NPPF, that due weight can be given to emerging plans with regards to the stage of preparation, any unresolved objections, and the degree of consistency with other NPPF policies. Part of the land is allocated at present in the Emerging Borough Plan as housing land under policy HSG1, which you can see is identified in red on the plan before you. The remainder of the application site is identified in blue, and this falls within a landscape buffer which is mentioned in policy HSG1. The landscape buffer element to this policy has received objections, and therefore only limited weight has been given to it, as this will be discussed in the forthcoming stages of the local plan hearing. In order to mitigate impact on the landscape buffer, the developer has removed some of the initially proposed development as indicatively shown on the master plan on the previous screen, leaving a considerable setback. It's therefore considered that this is now acceptable, taking into account the 5-year land supply and the limited weight that this buffer can be given. In relation to travel, transportation and highway safety, access to the site is being considered with this application. There are 2 points of access into the site from the highway network, and a third access point proposed linking through an adjacent site, which is still under consideration, and out onto Higham Lane. The first point of access here is off the A5, the second point here is off the long shoot, and the third point here is within the site. The first point of access is to the north onto the A5. This junction is proposed to be a signalised junction, but also accommodates a rest area within the site that caters for a lorry park as well as car parking spaces. This rest area is to replace the lay-bys that are on the A5 that will be lost as a result of the proposed access. Highways England have commented on the application as they are the body that is responsible for the A5 and are happy with the proposals, subject to a condition on the management of this rest area. That is on your agendas. The second point of access is out onto the long shoot and through phase 1 of the Callendar farm site, which I previously mentioned as Cresswell's Farm. This site received planning permission separately to the rest of the site for up to 150 dwellings. The detailed layout for this site is currently under consideration. But in order to upgrade and increase the capacity of this junction from the currently approved scheme, a traffic light system is proposed for this development. This involves the relocation of some bus stops on Higham Lane and the demolition of 2 dwellings on the long shoot, which you can see hatched both sides here. Local residents have objected to the impact that the relocated bus stops would have on access to their property, but the positioning of bus stops is not a matter that actually requires planning permission, and the moving of them could actually be carried out by the County Council without consent from this borough. Highways have confirmed that they are generally happy with the design of this junction. The third access is through a proposed link road that will run through this site and join up at a point to the northwest of the application site and continue on through to Higham Lane. This is signified here as an indicative position. There is a condition suggested on the addendum, condition 34, to secure the delivery of this access. Further discussions have taken place since the report was originally written, and contrary to the final paragraph on page 39, extending over to page 40, the number of dwellings is further limited. Warwickshire County Council have assessed the capacity of the local highway network on the long shoot, and to ensure that there is no additional significant impact, they have requested that a condition that only allows 10 houses on this site to be accessed solely from this junction prior to its signalisation. However, if another point of access can be achieved elsewhere, either to the north using the A5 or at a point to the northwest of the site and out onto Higham Lane, or elsewhere through other development, then 200 dwellings can be occupied. Before the occupation of the 600th dwelling, the link road out onto the A5 must be provided. Subject to the imposition of conditions, neither the County Council Highways or Highways England object to the development. In relation to open spaces and ecology, the development proposes approximately 16.2 hectares of green infrastructure and open space to the north of the site indicated here. This open space includes a community park, playing pitches, children's play, teenage provision and allotments. A pedestrian link and cycle network is proposed through the site. Parks and Countryside have been consulted and do not object to the provision of this, subject to the imposition of conditions. On the site there is a badger set, and with the approval of housing development surrounding this site, there is a much reduced area for foraging available. As such, a condition is suggested that ensures that a mitigation plan is submitted to the council to ensure there's no undue impact on the badgers. In relation to noise and air quality, the site is located close to the A5, and as such there would be some noise expected for the school and the dwellings closest to the A5 and from the proposed rest area. So this is indicatively where the houses could be located, and the proposed school is down here, also indicatively. The location to the A5 with the rest area in this location could result in some noise. However, development in the indicative master plan has actually been moved away from the A5, and as such the impact from noise on the residential properties from the A5 is lessened. There are conditions suggested to ensure that acceptable noise levels are achieved within the dwellings closest to these potential noise sources. There is, however, a potential impact from noise from the A5 and the rest area on the areas of open space, and if this is too great, there is a concern that the open space may not be utilised. As such, a condition is suggested that requires a noise bund to wrap around the open space, protecting it from noise from these sources. Turning to air quality, studies carried out with the application in the environmental impact assessment indicate that whilst there will be an increase in the concentrations of particulate matter and nitrogen dioxide, the increases will be negligible in relation to the current situation. This, I understand, is due to the routing of HGVs being likely to change as a result of new accesses proposed within the development. Subject to the imposition of conditions, Environmental Health have no objections relating to either noise or air quality. As members are aware, the NPPF sets out that planning obligations should be considered where otherwise unacceptable development could be made acceptable, but should only be sought if they meet 3 tests, being necessary, directly related to the development, and fairly and reasonably related to the development in kind. As you will see from the table on your agenda, there have been requests for Section 106 legal obligations from a number of bodies. The developer has scrutinised these requests and is agreeable to paying the majority of contributions, namely the George Eliot Hospital Trust, Warwickshire County Council Education, the NHS Primary Care, this council's leisure facilities, Warwickshire Police, County Highway Improvements, Public Transport, County Council Cycling, and our own Parks and Countryside. As set out on the addendum, there has been an amendment to the contributions sought by the County Education team, in that they now want the contributions for the secondary school to go towards the proposed new school on the top farm site that is currently under consideration. And if this does not come to fruition, they will be renegotiated for other schools within the borough. As this is an outline application for up to 850 dwellings, and the final numbers of houses is not yet known, there are actually no figures or amounts of money specified at present as a final contribution, but all amounts will be determined by a formulaic approach which will be set out in the legal agreement. The recommendation is therefore one of approval, subject to the completion of a legal agreement and the conditions as set out on the agenda and addendum. Thank you.
Okay, thanks Claire. It was remiss of me not to say that we do have Ben Sim from Warwickshire County Council Highways, if there's any questions regarding the highways a bit later on. So, our first speaker is Councillor Condicorn.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm Councillor for Weddington, and that covers the vast majority of this site. The access and the lower bit is in St Nicolas ward. Fundamentally, the thing I wanted to mention was air quality. It is inconceivable that 850 homes, 2,000 odd people and a retail centre will generate zero air quality impact. We've got the data that went with the air quality report that clearly shows far more cars on the road network, but what has happened is lorries and buses, HGVs, have disappeared off the road network, particularly around the Eton Road gyratory, Old Hinkley Road, Leicester Road, and also on Eastborough Way. This finger that lorries will be diverted, where to? We need to defer this application and find out what the transport modelling is for lorries, because a lorry produces about 6 to 8 times more pollution than a car. If, for example, on one site you take away 50 lorries and had 350 cars, that can be said to have no impact. But those 50 lorries haven't vanished. Where do they go? It is clear there is something seriously wrong with the modelling, particularly of HGVs, and this application coming 3 weeks before the Borough Plan hearings, we do not know what the road network is, what mitigation is going to be proposed, but what we do know is these lorries that go over the Leicester Road Bridge at the moment are either continuing going over the Leicester Road Bridge or they're going round the Eastborough Way and going through Attleborough. And if you look at Attleborough, there's the houses right by the mini roundabout, Harefield Road, Gadsby Street, right on the road. So if we reduce the lorries going through Old Hinkley Road, they're going to go through Attleborough. And so we need to know what the impact of this is in terms of air quality, where the lorries are going, because at the moment it's just magic. We put basically a quarter on the top side of Wellington and St Nick's, and the traffic doesn't make any more pollution. That is not plausible. And we need to know what improvements are being made and where things are going, because lorries do not vanish. And they do not just go down the A5. If we've got more houses, more bus services and a retail centre, all those lorries must go somewhere. And at the moment, the Eton Road gyratory, as you know, is very polluted, and Attleborough isn't even measured. We have no pollution monitoring on the A4250 through Attleborough until you get to Coton Arches. There is a serious problem, and it's just being brushed aside. The second thing I wanted to mention is the secondary school. Absolutely essential we have schools, and Top Farm may not happen. Top Farm could happen 5 or 10 years later. Why is this open-ended that we'll just do something? Why hasn't this application got a secondary school on it? There's all sorts of things which, if this was done after the Borough Plan, we'd know where we stand. This application is premature, and if you kicked it out today and brought it back again after we had some certainty, a lot of things would be clearer. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor. Are there any points of clarification? Michelle, come to call.
It's working.
Is it? Right. Yeah, I've got numerous concerns. I did put in a very long objection and things which hopefully people have been allowed to see and read. My concerns are, on one side the Borough Plan is being used as the reason that we need these things, that we haven't got enough houses, and these were the figures are coming from the Borough Plan. And then on another bit saying, oh well, the Borough Plan doesn't matter with regarding this landscape buffer. There has been an objection from the planning policy team saying about the landscape buffer, development must not extend beyond the northern boundary of the site in order to preserve a farmland buffer, the northern boundary of the site being what was proposed in the Borough Plan, SHG1. Preserve a farmland buffer between the A5 and the edge of residential development. The northern boundary should also be enhanced to soften the development edge through new hedgerow and tree planting along with small copses of trees in field corners. So on one side they're saying there must be this boundary, and suddenly this boundary doesn't actually matter. It only has limited weight and things. And it doesn't matter that you can suddenly put a road through that. And so that is a big concern of mine. Lots of agricultural land considered not significant because it's only this small bit, but that's been said on every application we've had all around that part of Nuneaton and things. So now it is significant. Where is our food to be grown? In terms of safety and things, I have, this Lorry Park is a big issue. There seems to be nothing that I could find in the things, actually any agreement as to who is going to be in charge of it. Even the police said, and I quote from that, I have serious concerns due to the crime implications. If it's not locked and if it is locked, who's in charge of that? If it's not locked, you know, you've got fly tipping, travellers, all sorts of potential issues. If you've got a lorry park there and you've got the pedestrian and cycle access to the site going from there, huge safety issue things. There's no connection between the site and the other developments that we've already got, i.e. St Nicolas Park and the Bellway development. And from what I can understand, this development would be at a different level from the Bellway development that's currently a lot of it's already built and things. So there's not even able to be a connection. We've got the one right of way, which originally they said would be a cycle link. That seems to have just disappeared into the ether. But that's the only link between this site and St Nicolas Park. Now, if we're going to get another development, we need connection between the existing properties and what have you and things, so that we can. It's a muddy path and things, and there's nothing about upgrading that. So that's just, you know, a number of the issues I have.
Thank you, Mrs. Conte. Are there any points of clarification? No? Councillor Tromans.
Thank you, Chair. As people are well aware, I'm not in favour of all of the developments that have happened in the North East of Nuneaton. I campaigned and spoke and voted against all of the developments that were not brownfield or sustainable long-term earmarked. It's really felt sometimes for the people that live in that part of town that it's been overdevelopment, not just development, because we've had no meaningful infrastructure delivery to mitigate against that. But I believe in democracy, and the controlling group have managed to keep control of the Borough Council, and so that gives them the mandate to press ahead with their development plans. So as a supporter of democracy, I accept where we are, and now I think I'm looking to make the best of the situation that we're in. And for possibly the first time in my area, for any application that's come forward, we have a development that might do some good and produce some infrastructure. A new school and a section of much needed road access to the north and to the A5. Although the borough plan isn't in place and we can't charge community infrastructure levy, there are some nonetheless very welcome Section 106 agreements to go towards a range of areas from health to policing. I did have huge concerns about the rest area though, but after being in dialogue with officers, I've received reassurances about the operation and management of this facility, and officers have also amended the proposed planning commission conditions to ensure that the proper boundary rails or some other security measures will be in place to prevent unauthorised encampments at the rest area, and I thank officers for that. The other concerns I have relate to the impact of the development on established communities. Historically, it's always been left to Warwickshire County Council Highways to seek conditions relating to wheel washes, road sweepers and the like. More recently, borough planning officers have put these conditions in, for example, where I made a request at the time of the application to build on land opposite Horston Grange. Those conditions have proved invaluable, and I would like to record my thanks to both the borough and county officers who followed up on those conditions when the developer let the road get into a really very bad state indeed, several times. Without those conditions, the situation would have been truly dreadful and dangerous, and I feel sure that this committee will also want to ensure that a full range of conditions relating to wheel washes and mud, dust, minimisation are put in place for each phase of this development too, and I would ask you to condition that accordingly. Thank you, Chair.
Is there any points of clarification? David Stentiford.
Thank you, Chair. David Stentiford for the applicant. We are aware from phase 1 of this development that there is significant and legitimate concern about how traffic growth is dealt with, particularly given the growth in dwelling numbers required in order to provide for the emerging plan numbers. In the light of those concerns, we undertook a public consultation exercise in March 2016, and we asked the public about their views concerning a possible direct link from the site to the A5 Watling Street. That option received support, but was of course not an option that had been considered as part of the emerging plan allocation. The assessment of highway implications of the emerging plan is the responsibility of the County Highways Authority and Highways England. In preparation of evidence for the plan examination, the county have commissioned a model known as Paramix, which contains details of existing traffic flows in the borough, and that model can be run with different development scenarios to determine the impacts of those scenarios. One of the reasons this application has been on deposit for so long has been that we've been working with the county and we've commissioned a specific modelling of the network with the local plan allocations and incorporating the proposed A5 link. What that modelling has shown is an overall improvement to the network as a consequence of the provision of the A5 junction, much as the public consultation exercise have anticipated. In the meantime, our consultants have been in liaison with Highways England, who see benefits from the new junction in terms of easing the congestion on the A5 Longshoot junction, and in safety terms by providing an alternative to the existing lay-bys, which are substandard, owing to the lack of space to provide a splitter and barrier with the main carriageway. The new rest area will be subject to planning conditions ensuring that it is properly monitored, managed and maintained to avoid adverse implications in the wider area. All of these negotiations have taken many months, and the final professional conclusion is that the addition of the A5 link offers significant benefits to the borough. The link has implications for the boundary of the site with the A5, anticipated in the emerging plan, but officers have confirmed in the recommendation that the landscaping proposed in this application associated with the new community park will provide an appropriate northern boundary to the development. The scheme now before you unlocks the HSG1 site and is a critical element in demonstrating the deliverability of the HSG1 allocation, a matter which the local plan inspector will be examining in only 4 weeks' time. Supporting the officer's recommendation today will send a strong positive message to the local plan examination. As you will see, conditions have been agreed which will ensure the site connects properly with its neighbours, and agreements have been reached to ensure that all implications of the development in terms of local services and infrastructure improvements are addressed in the Section 106 agreement. I commend the officer's report to members. Thank you.
Thank you. Any points of clarification? Excuse me. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to confirm that you said that this site, developing this site, would reduce the HGVs on the long shoots? Well, how will it do that? You know, we don't want you to put HGVs through a housing development. So how's that going to happen, please?
Thank you. Through you, Chair. I didn't say that it would reduce HGV movements in the long shoot. I don't know where we got that impression.
Sorry, my mistake.
What the traffic modelling does show is that the distribution of HGV movements will change as a consequence of the A5 link. And what that means is that in certain locations, HGV movements will actually be lower than in the current state of affairs, but naturally those HGVs, as Councillor Condicourt has said, will move to other locations. But the overall air quality assessment demonstrates that in none of the air quality monitoring assessment points that have been available to be analysed do the impacts increase by more than 1%. And from that point of view, they're deemed acceptable in environmental health terms. I don't know if that helps with your question, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pomfret.
Thank you. You mentioned that there have been arrangements made for the management of this rest area. Could you give me some reassuring words that this is going to work? Thank you.
Well, the arrangements that I referred to are covered by the planning conditions which are written into the report, and if the site gets its planning permission, then it will be an obligation on those developing the site to come forward with detailed management plans to demonstrate exactly how all aspects of the management, maintenance and control of the area will be undertaken, and those details will need to be agreed by your planning officers and may indeed come back to members. The precise details of that will only come forth when the precise details of the arrangements for the layout of the site are available to us.
That's okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other points of clarification? No? Does he need to come back at this point? Ben, at this point, you may get questions during the debate. In that case, then, to enable debate to take place, can I move the recommendation, which is the grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed? Any member? Councillor Longden. Oh, sorry. I forgot that bit. Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any member? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions for the officers because I'm slightly confused by some of the things which are on the paperwork and the addendum, so perhaps you could clear things up for me. If we look at page 30 of the report, it says objections from MBBC Parks and Countryside and MBBC Policy. I'm assuming the policy one is about the buffer going beyond the HSG 1 site under the Borough Plan. What was the Parks and Countryside one? So I don't remember you saying that had been met.
No, that has actually been resolved. It was in relation to the buffering and provision of bunding to the A5 in relation to the noise potentially around the site, so that has been agreed.
Right, okay, and the other one I've got is on the addendum today that we've had just minutes before we came into the meeting. It says, under consultation response, please add Highways England as an objector. I'm slightly confused.
That is an error. I'm not quite sure why that's on there. They do not object, and I've suggested conditions. So they do not object to the proposal at all. That is an error. I haven't seen this until tonight, so that's an error.
Right, because I was slightly confused because you'd said something in your report about them consenting to something, and it says on here about that, so that would confuse me. So thank you for clearing that up. I think this goes back to something that we were talking about in the meeting before Planning Committee, Chair, about indicative drawings and how useful they are in comparison to outline applications and so forth. I want to say from the outset that I think of all the applications I've seen around Weddington and St Nicolas, this is probably the best thought out in terms of the community facilities which can be given to local residents, because all the other ones which have come forward, the Weddington Fields along the Long Shoot, Eastborough Way, etc. It seems as if the developers have gone for broke in terms of maximising profit without putting anything back into the community. So I am pleased to see that there are things like a school planned in there, that there are things like community facilities and play areas. But I do still have some concerns. It's probably been made worse actually by the indicative drawing. Because, like Councillor Condacourt, I cannot envisage how adding 850 dwellings to an area will not have an impact, either plus or minus, on an air quality of an area. So I am concerned about that. What concerns me even more is the fact that with that buffer of land at the top, which is beyond the HSG 1 allocation, where it's proposed to be used, we're putting a play area right by the A5. Although there will be some things around it, the A5 is effectively at a certain point today a mini motorway with a significant amount of traffic going forward and backwards and the resulting pollution that causes. And having children in that particular area where there is increased pollution concerns me, and the position of the school concerns me where it's proposed, because again that is by the A5 and children are particularly susceptible to pollution problems in their formative years, and this is a primary school. So that concerns me about that side, and so potentially the indicative drawing has made my thinking a bit worse on this. I've tried to think about any other school in the borough where it is as close to such a main arterial route as this, and I'm struggling to think of one. And that is probably weighing quite considerably in my reasoning for refusal on this one. That's my own personal view. It's proposed for up to a 2-form entry in Weddington on that primary school which is proposed. It says up to, so it could be a 1-form entry, it could be a 2-form entry. Going forward, and this is about sustainability, most primary schools that I can think of as well are like 3- or 4-form entry. So I'm not sure how, even though they're leaving the land available for potential expansion, I'm not sure we are at this stage future-proofing, because you're going to have those 850 houses and the kids that wanted to go there, and all the other surrounding areas where we are building. I am grateful to see, at the last minute, a change to the conditions about where the 106 money was going to go for secondary provision. Because I tried to get some information out of Catherine Morton. She seemed stumped as me about the requirement for sending money over to Hartshill, which isn't in the borough, and the kids weren't even going to go to Hartshill, it would have been in the catchment area. So I am pleased to see that. But my main concern is about that outline thing and the fact that 850 cars, potentially, so double that effectively, because most families are two-car families, that area is not coping at the moment. It will take at least 15 to 20 years to build that out, and I cannot see, with this application alone, how it is going to help the traffic situation in an already dire end of the borough. So on those grounds about the traffic, the pollution and the school, I'm going to vote to refuse.
Any other member? Councillor Partridge.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got concerns that you've probably picked up already about this rest area. It's reassuring to know that there'll be bunds there to make it secure against unwanted visitors and so on. But I do wonder about having, I think it's 23 vehicles being able to park there, presumably 24/7. The existing lay-bys are obviously available all day and all night. Quite near to houses, quite secluded. It's obviously off the main highway there. And I was wondering, I assume it's because of the proximity of junctions, why the existing lay-bys couldn't be expanded, as was mentioned in the developer's 3 minutes. I'm quite concerned about that, and it also takes up quite a lot of space from the area which is supposed to provide a barrier between the development and the A5, when you'd have thought facilities for vehicles would be better spread out along the A5. Some expert information on that would be welcome. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody want to... Who's going to... Ben, is it you? Okay.
I can't speak on behalf of Highways England, but I can speak on behalf of Warwickshire County Council and what we expect. The lay-bys have not been extended, you are quite right, because they would sit within visibility displays, but also there's a move away from lay-by provision because there isn't sufficient services to support HGV drivers. There's a general move to having dedicated facilities with services such as showers and toilet facilities that provide those necessary functions for HGV drivers, rather than using just lay-bys on the side of the road which don't have any of those facilities. And that's the reason why we at Warwickshire support that approach rather than lay-bys. And I don't want to speak on behalf of England, but I'm guessing that's the same approach for themselves. However, the ongoing maintenance still needs to be resolved, and we've got a sufficient condition for that.
Thank you. Councillor Bonner?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like a little bit more reassurance about the schools. 2 schools here were possibly. The last time I saw a school drawn on a proposed development, it was quite close to an existing primary school. It's one of the few developments that we did actually stop. It was the one off Gypsy Lane. And when I questioned the developer about this new primary school and what the discussions had been with Warwickshire County Council Education Authority, I was told there hadn't been any discussions. So I'm hoping that's not the case this time. As somebody's all rightly said, we need quite a large primary school if it's going to accommodate the children from the surrounding area. My other concern is the possibility of eventual secondary school. Because I understand from the Education Authority there's quite a large capacity in one of our existing schools in the town, in the west side of town. You can't get much further west for a secondary school than Eden Academy. And yet here we've got lots of housing developments, you can't get much further east. So we've got existing capacity in one school that's several miles away. And I'm not sure as catchment areas come into it anymore, because I know a lot of secondary schools have children travelling many, many miles to get to school. So I don't know if anybody here can answer or can give me any more reassurances, but I'm always quite sceptical since that Gypsy Lane development application about seeing schools drawn onto housing developments. Thank you.
I do know that the applicant in this instance has been in contact with the Education Authority and certainly the infrastructure team at the County Council discussing the provision. And originally there was only the provision for the primary school, and as a result of the discussions, that's why there is now land that has been reserved for future expansion. So I know that discussions have been ongoing in relation to this particular site. In relation to the size of the school, we can only expect this developer to mitigate his own impacts. We can't expect them to mitigate the impacts of everybody else's development elsewhere. The County Council are looking to secure a secondary school to the north of Nuneaton on the Top Farm site, which is their own planning application. And what they've asked for in this application is that a financial contribution towards secondary education is given to that school, but if that doesn't come to fruition, then they will look at capacity elsewhere on existing schools to deal with the secondary education for the people on this site. So in terms of, again, going back to the primary school, we can only expect them to deal with the capacity and deal with the issues on this particular site, but we are looking at future-proofing to have area for expansion to deal with any others, so we can get financial contributions from other sites to deal with the new school that's proposed on this site.
Okay, thank you.
Can I come back on that one, please, Chair?
Yeah.
So, am I to understand then that each housing development can be asked for the education needs of primary schools only on its own, within its own boundaries? So, that seems a bit ridiculous to me that it's not happening, but we would end up with lots of tiny schools. And then you've just contradicted yourself by saying that the developer is responsible for the primary school requirements on this side, and yet we're going to ask them to pay for secondary school on another. So I'm even more confused now than I was before.
Okay. In relation to every development that is individually considered, as I set out in my presentation, the developer can only be expected to mitigate the impact that their development has. So we couldn't ask them to provide a 24-film nursery school and pay for everything for it in relation to that site. What has been negotiated is that there is a sufficient size of school and sufficient land for expansion to deal with the expected numbers of pupils around this area. So although they're providing the land, they then won't be expected to provide more contributions for other areas that they're not actually relating to. In relation to the secondary school site, because they're not providing that on their own site, then they will have to pay to mitigate the impacts of this development through a 106 obligation to another school, in whatever format that takes. Is that clearer?
Okay, thank you. I've got myself down, but is there any other member before that? Okay. No, I just wanted to make a couple of points. I wanted to reassure Councillor Tromans, particularly, I know he's been a member of this committee before, is that this Planning Applications Committee makes its decisions based on the information given to us, because it was mentioned a couple of times, I don't know why, about the controlling group of the council. That has nothing to do with this Planning Applications Committee. We will determine applications on their own merits. If I have a concern over anything, and I think a number of people have already raised it, I don't think it would do any harm to raise it again, because it will have to come back to us if things come back in a detailed form, and that is about the rest area, because it will need to be properly managed. So I want to know who's going to manage it. I accept you can't tell us now, but if this goes through today, if it goes through, then certainly we want that detail on how that's going to be done. Where I do, in regards to that, sometimes planning applications can also make improvements to some things. And I actually see that area the parking up place, the rest area, as making the A5 a bit safer. Because the current designs having lay-bys and then slow vehicles pulling out onto fast roads, to me doesn't seem the safest way. So I can actually see that having a benefit of improving the safety on the A5. I also just wanted to, because I don't know the answer, Mrs Condecourt raised a thing. She seemed to think that the new managed site would be a problem with crime. And I can actually see that being the other way around. That if it's a properly managed site, it would probably improve any crime. Because at the moment, I don't know about these particular lay-bys on this part of the A5, but a lot of the problems arise from wagons being parked up in lay-bys as it is now. So I could see that, if we've got a properly managed site, being a further improvement. Right, anything to finish on, Claire or Ben? No?
Just to add a little bit to the information about the rest area, the condition requires the provision of electric hookups. So in relation to potential noise from the rest area, this should actually alleviate a problem in that although the lorries will have to pass by some houses to get to the rest area, it means that their engines and refrigeration units won't have to be ticking all night. They will be able to do an electric hookup which will eliminate the noise. So that is actually, again, another improvement.
Okay, thank you. It's been moved and seconded, the recommendation, which is to grant planning permission subject to a legal agreement and the conditions printed. Just bearing in mind, if that does happen, it's going to come back to us at some point anyway. All those in favour of that? And against? I think that's it. And abstentions? I think that's it. Okay, so that's approved. Thank you.